On Friday, of course, we had in the city David Cameron, the Prime Minister, wrapping himself again in the language of Margaret Thatcher. It was, of course, a national conference, and it was interesting to see the photographs of the audience, because I think there was probably about half the size. I understand also from reading the newspapers today that actually sent out invites to people in Edinburgh to come for a freebie, but nobody turned up. Now, we have David Cameron, who urged us on Friday, and various politicians over the last 2-3 days who've said that they want us to vote no to save the United Kingdom. Cameron said he wants to build a land of opportunity for all, although I'm not quite sure how you build a land of opportunity on the ruins of 1 million more children living in poverty. When you look at what the Tories are proposing, they have a hit list: benefits, social security, the welfare state, everything that's been talked about over the course of this weekend. And as voters, we will have no say in whether Westminster does away with the NHS, whether it does away with the welfare state, and whether it takes us into our next illegal war. And of course, Westminster handed £1.4 trillion to the bankers. Of course, we had Gordon Brown this week in town as well. And when you listen to Gordon Brown and the list of promises you make, you would think that that man actually wasn't at the heart of a Labour government for some 14 years. 12 years of those as a Chancellor of the Exchequer, and 2 of those years as Prime Minister. And David Cameron, of course, along with everybody else, tells us that we're all in this together, that there is no alternative to austerity. Yet when you look at it, when you actually look at the issue of austerity, we're not all making the same sacrifices. And the Tories think we still haven't gone far enough. When Cameron stands up week after week at that dispatch box with his 23 millionaires out of 29 on the front benches, he talks austerity, more austerity and more austerity, and they know they can carry on hounding the poor, because the Labour benches opposite them don't have a spine, will not argue back. They are only a paler blue version of austerity to offer. And I know Jackie, who I've stood on many platforms over the years with, got a hard time yesterday. But I have to say this: 10 more years of austerity, cuts and mass poverty is all the Tory party and the Labour Party can promise. That means cuts for the rest of us and bumper bonuses and pension pots for Osborne and Cameron's pals. And it's not just the Tories who are promising that unrelenting austerity, hence why there was hostility to the likes of Jackie Baillie or every Labour politician that stands up and claims, and I've heard them in various Yes campaign forums, talking about the values and the conviction politics and why they actually joined the Labour Party, how they believe in social justice, how they believe in social equality, how they believe in solidarity, and how they believe in that S word, socialism. But in practice, it's absolutely, completely different. The Labour leader, Ed Miliband, declared last year that if Labour gets elected, it will stick with the Tories' austerity spending plans. He said, so when George Osborne stands up next week and announces his cuts in day-to-day spending, we will not be able to promise now to reverse them. His admission that he accepted austerity was a blow for millions of people in this country who look to Labour to oppose the attacks they face. The only way we're going to stop this government, after government, imposing cuts, is to actually get organised. To organise and to unite, and that word solidarity. Britain today is much more unequal today than it was a year ago, than it was 10 years ago. The richest people in Britain have grabbed another £35 billion last year. People on benefits are having their income slashed by the bedroom tax and other attacks on welfare. People are dying because of the welfare attacks, and those who are in work, who have had average pay rises of a measly 1%. Over the last 6 years, those at the lowest end of the working sector have seen their wages actually fall in real terms by 14%, and at the same time you have the official rate of inflation, which means that everything is rising, where governments start and say, well, we're going to give a 1% pay rise. What does that actually mean in reality for families up and down this country, whether they be in Scotland or whether they be in England? Unfortunately, the Tories have a simple answer: encourage even more rich scroungers to come to this Britain so that they can create jobs. It's a height of hypocrisy for the Tories to claim that they care about creating jobs when they have thrown 370,000 public sector workers on the dole since they came to office. And when I never heard the last session, but this question about the trickle-down theory. They say that if the rich get richer, we'll all benefit because they pay more taxes, they employ more people. What actually happens in reality is that rich just get richer at our expense. The Tories have slashed corporation tax to just 20%. The Tory Chancellor, George Osborne, bragged that this is the lowest business tax of any major economy in the world. And when you think about that Margaret Thatcher, who was supposed to be the worst Tory Prime Minister, under Margaret Thatcher, corporation tax was actually 52%. Tories have brought it down to 20%. The Tories have made it easier for bosses to sack workers, claiming that this will encourage bosses to employ people. They've even argued that firms should be exempt from equality laws that stifle job creation. And none of this has actually helped ordinary people. Company after company has been said, pay no corporation tax. The megabucks of the rich are more likely to trickle into offshore accounts than ever to find their way into the bank accounts of ordinary people. The Tories and their rich mates don't want to make life better for the working class. They want to squeeze as much as possible for themselves. They try and use the idea that we all have the same interest to help them get away with their attacks. And we actually don't have any interest in helping the rich get richer. And it makes me sick when I see Labour politicians over the last few weeks line up on platforms with the Tories claiming that we're better together. Line up with company directors who have had a hand in destroying this country. Line up with the leaders of these banks, Britain's super rich, who've seen their wealth increase by an average of 30% to a total of £336 billion, the biggest increase in over 22 years. So when they say to you crisis, you say, what crisis? After 300 years of this union, Glasgow has 6 out of 10 of the most deprived areas in the United Kingdom, where some 51% of our children live in poverty. From Tony Blair to Gordon Brown to David Cameron, and if Ed Miliband gets his way, they have all out-Thatchered Thatcher. They've turned London into a playground for the super rich. They've left us at the mercy of the bankers. And let's be clear that this economic crisis has absolutely nothing to do with workers. It has absolutely nothing to do with benefit claimants. It has absolutely nothing to do with illegal immigrants or Eastern Europeans, but it has everything to do with bankers and politicians. And when you talk about the question of racism, and you talk about the case of Mark Duggan in Tottenham, the flashpoint was the police killing of Mark Duggan and the lies and the callous treatment of his family and their friends which followed. And that was just the latest episode in a history and a catalogue of racism and police brutality in that area. No police officer has been found guilty of a death in custody in the past 40 years. You combine the suspicion and the resentment towards the police based on experience and memory with high poverty and large unemployment, and the reasons why the people took to the streets to riot became clear. Decades of individualism, competition, state-encouraged selfishness has made Britain one of the most unequal countries in the world. And those riots were an explosion of bitterness and rage. And I'm actually surprised we haven't had more riots. And I don't say the riots are the solution. We need to organise. We need to give an alternative and a solution. But riots are what happen in a society of growing inequality, where there are great pools of unemployment, poverty, systematic police harassment, and where young people feel that they have no future. It's the lost generation created by the Tories who are at the centre of these riots. At some point, people pushed to the wall will turn and they will fight back, just as they did during Margaret Thatcher's reign in the 1980s, the Great Slump of the 1930s and the Great Depression of the 1880s, all periods which saw riots in Britain. The anarchy of the market is far more devastating than the supposed anarchy on the streets that we saw, which took place in the riots. The bankers have enriched themselves far more effectively than any looter ever did. In Tottenham, if you look at that one place alone, 54 people chase every job vacancy. The £81 billion of cuts decreed by David Cameron's government will mean hundreds of thousands of job losses, devastate communities, devastate families, and destroy services. And it's interesting to note in this week, because it seemed to be every night there was a programme on. There was a programme about Tony Benn, there was programmes on about the anniversaries of the miners' strike, there was programmes on about Bob Crow, and there was one thread that was running through all of them. Every great battle for change, every great battle for reform, in the defence of workers' rights or against injustice, brutality or war, our rulers have always made the same noises. I may agree with your cause, usually not, but I abhor your methods. That's the message they always deliver. Civil disobedience, violence at protests are in their eyes always wrong. This was as true in the battle for votes for women. It was true in the battle and the fight against Vietnam War. It was true in the movement for civil rights in Northern Ireland, the miners' mass pickets in the early 1970s, the struggle against the National Front in the 1970s, and the campaign against the poll tax. And just in case you were fooled, as you've seen a lineup of those individuals after individuals, from David Cameron to the Labour cabinet, all the rest of them, they also had the same message for those who fought back against apartheid. And in all these cases, we were told that those who were protesting were ruining their case. Strangely enough, though, when you look at all those cases, to a greater or a lesser extent, they were successful. And that's where lies the key. Government ministers and the press all say they are in favour of our right to protest. What they forget to add is that they are against our right to win. And this is very instructive. We are told strikes are wrong, we are told violence is wrong, otherwise protest is fine. But those who are telling us the violence and strikes and so on discredit the cause are the very same people who ignore the cause when the protests are peaceful. One cause that couldn't be ignored, of course, was the movement to stop the war in Iraq. And again, I say this, it sickens me to see Labour minister after Labour minister now line up and say, oh, we got it wrong. Oh, we're sorry. But they all voted for it. They all sent the troops in to die and to kill in Iraq. And it almost certainly that movement against Iraq represented the majority of the population. It had everything a protest should have. It had numbers, it had public opinion, a just cause, airtime, articulate and determined leaders. It was amazing just how peaceful it remained, and yet Tony Blair chose to ignore it. And of course the media and the politicians will argue that they are against violence, but they have no problem with violence as long as they've sanctioned it. Police officers can kill demonstrators. Police officers can execute black men. Police officers can drag people from our wheelchairs. They can beat the living daylights out of Kettle students. And then when we are asked to understand that they have a difficult job to do. Peacekeeping soldiers can shoot to kill, can torture and terrorize. Warplanes can rain down bombs on innocent civilians, and dissent can be ruthlessly crushed. But it's all legitimate because it's done within the law and with government sanction. And the simple message is that they can enforce change with violence, but we are not allowed to. And the fact I will say is that our movement hates violence. We're not for violence. We hate their wars. We hate their violence that capitalism inflicts on entire peoples in order to create profit. We hate the way they seek to divide and rule, so we turn violently on each other on the grounds of race, religion, or sexuality. And our strength has to be, when we look at this movement, in the days and the months and the years to come ahead, it has to be in uniting and it has to be in solidarity. And anyone listening to that millionaire, old Etonian David Cameron telling us that we're all in this together can surely spot the fraud. And just as when Nelson Mandela died, and Owen said this, they've all lined up to pay their respects to Bob Crow. They've all lined up to pay their respects to Tony Benn. I have to say this, that I don't think Bob Crow would have even bothered to spit on them, some of those, unless, of course, he could have drowned them, right? But he wouldn't even bother to have had the dialogue with them. We need to organise. There is one message from Bob Crow, as has been said repeatedly. We need to organise like Bob did. If this wretched, nasty, thoroughly right-wing government is to be resisted, defeated, and ultimately got rid of. Bob was often described as a dinosaur, but he did increase the membership of the RMT. He did win better conditions for the RMT members, and he did make those public sector workers some of the best paid in the country, because he understood one thing, that this government is waging a class war, and if this government is waging a class war on us, we also have to be class warriors, and we should fight as hard as possible for our people as they fight for theirs. If we don't turn the tide, then we'll regret it for decades and for generations to come. And it's time we fought with our hands untied and built large-scale resistance to the Tories. And I'd say this also to the trade union leaders, that also all lined up to pay their respects to the likes of Bob Crow and to Tony Blair. It's time to break their ties with the Labour Party. It's time to fight for their members. It's time to fight for society. And I'll say this on the issue of racism, and I've said it at demonstration after demonstration for over a decade. As a Muslim, we're told that we have to demonstrate our Britishness. And I say this, as a Muslim, I have nothing to demonstrate about my Britishness. I'm proud of my roots. I'm proud of the fact that my parents came from Pakistan and emigrated to this country in the 60s, that they sweated blood and tears to help build this country, that they brought me and my sister up, that I was born in Liverpool, but I came to Scotland and I made Glasgow my home. I have nothing to demonstrate about whether I'm British, Scottish, or whether I'm a Scouser. But all of this, all the arguments by the likes of Blunkett, because it wasn't David Cameron that started the arguments. It wasn't David Cameron that started the racism. It was David Blunkett, when he was Home Secretary, that led the attacks on asylum seekers, that led attacks on the immigrants in this country, all of which energised the grateful British National Party on its road to electoral success nearly a decade ago. The BNP, and now we have UKIP, and now we have the EDL, who describe pensioners who suffer from bad housing and poverty, but they blame asylum seekers. Of course, they don't mention that asylum seekers are denied the right to work. They say nothing about the government casting them out into complete destitution or threatening to take away their children. They suggest nothing that will help the plight of pensioners, but they present sympathy for them, and they offer them nothing but hate for strangers. Westminster operates a barbaric system that allows little for hope, and we and this movement have to offer hope. On the question of the racists, well, yesterday was the 10th anniversary of Chris Donald, and I'm proud to say that after 10 years, once again, the Scottish Defence League and the BNP were denied their right to march, but that began with a tradition. That began with a tradition that we have had repeatedly in Scotland, that they will not be allowed to ride the march. They will not be given a platform. And then 10 years ago, when Angela Donald, the mother of Chris Donald, in the midst of her grief, when the BNP and Nick Griffin, that Master Führer, wanted to march in Pollock Shields, claiming we want rights for whites, Angela Donald, in the midst of her grief, after the murder of a 15-year-old son, horrifically murdered in a racist attack by 3 thugs from Pollock Shields who had incidentally terrorised the Asian community and the white community for a number of years, came out and said that they will not divide us, and pleaded to the community not to take revenge attacks, and told the British National Party, you are not welcome. And every year that family has said, you are not welcome in our community, in our streets, and in our country. We defeated them yesterday. We have to keep defeating them, because this government would like to divide us. They would like to divide and rule. And I'll finish off by saying this. I want to turn to the question of independence. And I say this as a socialist, and I say this as an internationalist. The best thing that we can do to break the back of this British government, to break imperialism, to break this state, is to break the state in half. The unionists don't want the hard facts. They don't want the timetables. They don't want to talk about illegal wars. They don't want to talk about Trident. They don't want to talk about austerity. They don't want to talk about misery. But why should we be resigned to an economy being under the control of a handful? Why should a handful be able to threaten the future of entire nations from their £100 million yachts sitting away in some Riviera hundreds of miles away? And the Alliance, and look at these people, the people that are lined up to say that we shouldn't vote for independence. The Alliance, the Royal Bank of Scotland, the Bank of Scotland, Barclays, Standard Life, Lloyds, British Petroleum, Shell, Sainsbury's, George Osborne says no, Ed Balls says no, David Cameron says no, Ed Miliband says no, and Joanne Lamont, sometimes when she does speak, also says no. And there's a coalition of banks of the City of London. The Tories and Labour has been for the last several months a non-stop onslaught of telling us that we're better together. You can't have the pound, you can't be in Europe, your money won't be safe because we'll take your banks and your pensions, and if you don't do as you're told, we'll take your passports and we'll kick you out of Europe and we'll build border posts at Carlisle. People should ask the simple question when it comes to September the 18th, who actually runs this country? Who are the people to make these threats? Who elected these financiers and the captains of industry? And why should we take daily lectures about the irresponsibility of independence from banks and financiers? The very people who nearly destroyed the UK's economy out of their unrestrained greed. Being lectured on public responsibility by banks is like being lectured on childcare by paedophiles. That's the extent of it. And I want to end by saying this, that we do have an opportunity to make real change. We have to unite. There has to be solidarity. And I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not in a political party. I'm not a member of the Scottish National Party. I'm certainly not a member of the Labour Party. But I'll say this. I don't have a crystal ball, but there is one cast iron guarantee I can give you. If you campaign, if you join in the fight for yes, and if we deliver the vote for yes, the people who live in Scotland will finally make the decisions that affect Scotland. Westminster will no longer have the right to dictate what we should think, what we should create, what we should produce. We'll no longer be told we cannot govern ourselves from warfare to welfare, from employment to foreign policy. From cradle to grave, we will have the right to decide our destiny. And I'm not naive to think that come the 19th of September, that we will be living in a socialist utopia. But I'll tell you what, it's a damn sight better than what we're being offered at the moment. And it'll be a stepping stone to fight for the rest of what we want. The vote for an independent Scotland must be a means for a bigger dream. And it's not about Alex Salmond, it's not about David Cameron, it's not about Joanne Lamont. It's bigger than any politician or any single party. It's about building social justice, social equality. And even if there's one thing out of that wish list we get, no nuclear weapons on the Clyde, then it will be worth it. And the building of that resistance to austerity has to be at the heart of the yes vote. Thank you, comrades and sisters.